When the pressure is high and the energy low, that's when your business needs inspiration to change and to grow. It's also when true captains show up. Hi, I'm Mark Francis, and I'm the host of this podcast that invites industry leaders from all over the world to answer the question, who's your captain? When you need to motivate and to mobilize, to develop and enable your team. Whether you are new to being a leader or you aspire to be a captain, this podcast is for you. Welcome everybody to Who's Your Captain? I'm Mark Francis, your host, and I'm simply thrilled to welcome Dominique Roddier. Dominique, hi.
Thanks, Mark. It was great to meet you, and thanks for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, it's so good. And I'm going to ask everyone a question to get them thinking straight away. And the question is this: if you had a business that was, that was about the ocean and about energy, what would you call it? What would you call it, Dominique?
Ocean energy.
Ocergy. Ocean energy. Ocergy. So you're CEO of Ocergy. It's a remarkable business. Tell me a bit about it.
So it is about sustainability more than just ocean energy. There's three pillars on sustainability. Obviously, there's the finance, there's taking care of people, but there's the energy part, making sure that we, the renewable energy. And that's what I think we're going to focus on today, on extracting energy out of the ocean. There's multiple sources of energy in the ocean. You got obviously wave energy, tidal energy, heat, water, OTEC is called, and then you have wind. And you would think, well, wind is not really ocean. And it's true, there's a lot of wind on land, but there is a lot of wind out in the ocean, and so that's where we're doing today.
Now this is genuinely magical because, and all of us as human beings now see huge fixed wind farms all over the land, frankly, and a little bit in the sea. But your core idea is magical because it's not fixed and it floats. So this is about gaining energy from the wind on the ocean, but not necessarily near the shore, is it? Because you can be as far out as you like. Now, tell us a little bit more about that core idea because it sounds incredibly exciting.
So let's go back to oil and gas. And I know we don't want to go to oil and gas, but we're going to go for it better. And we're going to go back to Texas in 1972 when everything's on land and all the pumps and things like that. And someone said, well, there's a field out in the ocean. It's in, 10 meters, and let's put a little jacket and let's drill there. And the reason they went to that beach was because there was the resource, there was a big field. Fast forward 20 years later, and in the whole Texas Gulf is all the big oil companies. I worked for ExxonMobil, Biner Materials, Shell, Chevron, BP, Equinor, Total Energy. They're all there, and they're all drilling in 10,000 meters, 10 kilometers, finding oil fields, huge platforms. We call them elephant fields. But it's more expensive than on land, to bring all this infrastructure. But the amount of oil and gas that's on the seabed in the Gulf of Mexico, North Sea, and everything is enough to justify those investments. So bigger resources. Exactly. What about wind? Putting a wind turbine offshore, whether it's fixed or floating, is going to be a lot more expensive than putting a wind turbine onshore. But the resources are better, and we can make the projects more economical, bigger, and better revenue. Why? Biggest turbine that you can put on land, probably, start talking about size, but 2 megawatt or 3 megawatt, blades about 50, 60 meters. You're limited, and everyone's seen the videos of the truck carrying a blade going to the French villages, and takes an hour and a half or 2 hours, and they move inches by inches and move the blades back and forth to make it to a road. And that's the limit of how big you can go. When you're offshore, you build, all of the big turbine manufacturers, they're in Denmark, they build near a quay. Then they put them offshore on a big vessel, and then they go straight to the sites. So there's really no limit in terms of size. The limit is not how big a blade can be. The limit is how big of a vessel can you build to carry those blades. So you can go to much bigger turbines. And then in terms of resources, well, when the wind blows in the middle of the Atlantic or the Pacific, it just doesn't stop at night or in the morning because you've got the heat thermal effect, the land, heats up faster, cools down faster. So you've got all these different type of wind. Everybody knows in some places you've got, an onshore wind early in the morning and an offshore wind back at night, due to that gradient. In San Francisco, for example, where I live, in the summer, we've got 25 knots of wind every single day between 2 and 5. At 7 o'clock, it dies. So when you look offshore, you don't have this. And so what you have is you have big storms coming through and they go across the Pacific, across the Atlantic. So your wind is a lot more continuous. We're going to talk about something called the capacity factor. Capacity factor is, for example, for a solar panel, assume that there's no cloud, your capacity factor will be 50% of the time because half of the time is night, half of the time is day.
Yeah.
So capacity factor for wind is given a turbine that can produce, say, 10 megawatt. How many kilowatt hours would you have or megawatt hours would you have over a year? If it was 100%, it'll be 265 times 24 times 10 megawatt. A good capacity factor onshore is about 30%. The good capacity offshore is about 55 or 60%. So again, very much bigger resources. So I'm an architect. And people say, well, we want to do this. It's like, do not do anything offshore unless you absolutely have to. It's big, it's windy, it's corrosive, it's everything you don't want to be at. But if you're going to do it, then come and talk to us because we know how to do it. So, so that's kind of what we do is we go to the extreme environments, waves that are 17, 18 meters tall, and we design structures that go there.
Now, this is, honestly, just listening to you, and this is a different world for me. I'm a simple guy that, is a salesperson and does stuff. And then I listen to you and I think, this is a whole new world potentially. Because what I'm hearing is that you can have a floating wind farm, effectively, a structure that is on the sea, but is not fixed. So it's movable, which is a good thing. It can go as far out as you like, which again, I hear you say is a good thing because there's more consistent wind. So it's a once it's out there, incredibly efficient way to gather energy. It's gloriously renewable, not oil and gas, which is your original story back in Texas. So there are so many good things about this, Dominique. And yet there's a huge, almost like upfront cost of production. And I know you have an engineering background and you have a creativity and entrepreneurial spirit. So you've got the big idea. You've also got the ability to make an incredible structure. And now let's talk finance. How do you manage to get the right level of investment to do this incredibly well and incredibly big? I know it's a huge question. Because that's the barrier to making this the only way we should find our energy. What do you think? How do you manage to get funded for this?
So when you don't go to a bank for a loan, the first thing you have to do, and almost the only thing, is you have to reduce the risk to levels that are acceptable to the bankers.
Yeah. Risk management.
It's all about risk. If you have a project that makes money, they'll finance it if the risk is low and you have a business case, but it makes money. So how do you reduce the risk of something like offshore wind or floating offshore wind? First, you have to show that it works. It takes time. So now we're going to go back to 2009.
Prove it's a good thing, yeah.
So 2009, Statoil, which is now Equinor, the Norwegian oil and gas company, put the first 2 megawatt pilot in the water in Norway. 2011, so 2 years later, a company that I didn't found, but has modified the business plan to do floating wind, called Principal Power. We put the second pilot, another 2 megawatt pilot, in Portugal in 2011.
And give us a flavor for 2 megawatts, Dominique. Help those who don't understand that number get a flavor for the size of that, the value.
So I have a picture of me on top of the nacelle, 70 meters up in the air, with the mouths going like this and the blades going like that. And, I'm attached, obviously, but It's tall. I'm going to tell you, it's tall.
It's a very, very big thing.
It's a big turbine, and the floater underneath was in terms of weight, it was 1,200 tons.
Wow.
So 1,200 tons. So it's a pretty big floater. It's about 50 meters. It's 3 columns. Columns are about 8 meters in diameter, and so it's a big structure. That project back then was the cheapest that we've done. And still, I think the cheapest floater pilot, except the one we're doing now. But what did those pilots? Now there was a few in Japan, and then what did those pilots do? They proved one thing. We proved that we could make a turbine spin on a floater. And the most important thing that came out of that floater, it's a big investment, in the tens of millions, was one curve that showed the power curve of the wind turbine onshore, on the fixed offshore floater, and on the wind float. And the wind float had a ballasting system that would keep the turbine vertical, so it was the same. And so you average the waves out, and the 3 curves aligned. So what does that mean? That proves investors that on a floating wind turbine, we can generate power, and the power curve is the same. So if we can manage to keep the turbine spinning, basically, then we can finance floating wind. So that was 2010, but that's not.
So this is now what I'm getting, and I'd love to get an understanding of this. This is a really long journey in terms of your involvement, your leadership.
Yeah. That was we sold the rights to the wind float to Principal Power in 2007. Then there was reporting that we merged and everything, and then we left, and I'm sure we'll talk about those blurry details. But let me get to the second point. So now we've shown, by the 2012 to 13, that we can have a power curve that makes so it's possible. Now we have to start worrying about how do we do bigger projects? How do we get data for a few years to show that it shows? So then, and all of the what we call pre-commercial projects that happen in Europe and also in Japan had government funding. So governments taking the risk. Some of them, and the stuff that we did with Principal Power, were bank financed. But what we bank financed was the delta between the price of electricity and the grants that were given. So for wind float, Atlantic, there was wind float, there was NER, there was European scheme that gave some money. There was 2 projects in Scotland under a very favorable tariff called the renewable offshore credit, the RAC. Everyone talked about this. We managed to squeeze in and do a project there. So now we show that we can bank finance projects, provided that the economics are correct. Meaning, there's additional money that comes in that just sweetens the pot. Where are we today? Well, we've done of those. There's about 200 megawatt of projects installed, probably 20 to 30 units. We did 12 at Principal Power. So now how do you get to the part where you remove the subsidies, you have a tariff, and you bank finance that? And for that, you have to reduce the cost. But economy of scale is not enough. Oh, I'm going to build 10 units instead of 1. The cost is going to go down. Well, your amount of steel is not going to go down. So the price is not really going to go down that much. So what is everybody working today, or the ones that are not should be working on? What we worked on at Ocergy is industrialization. So it's really about making 10 units exactly the same, 1 unit per week, looking at the cost across the entire supply chain and reduce. So if you want to reduce by 20% your cost, you're not going to reduce by 50% your turbine and not the rest. You have to reduce by 20% every single thing, from engineering to turbine to design to operation to risk to insurance. All of it has to reduce. And so that's really where the industry is at today. It's looking good. I mean, there are a lot of projects in Europe that have been sanctioned last year and this year. 2006, there's going to be 1.5 gigawatt just in France in 3 projects, all the 09. SE06, that was last year, was 2 projects of 250 megawatt. There was SE05, that was 1 project of 250 megawatt. That's just France. UK, same thing. Last year had 1 project of 400 megawatt. This year there was 2 projects of another 200 or 300 megawatt. So it's coming, and the gigawatt scale is coming. but it takes
this is
25 years.
remarkable, Dominique. This is remarkable, and you are remarkable because usually leaders are they have a functional expertise as well as a general management expertise. But you have to. I've listened to you, and there's several functions that you have to be not just cognizant of, but actually very strong, competently at leading. I mean, one of them is finance, and another one is selling. You've got to be a really good salesman to be able to convince people to invest in such a long-term project. And you're an engineer, so you're a multifaceted engineer in terms of you're an oceanic engineer, you're an aeronautic engineer, and that so you bring expertise to the build, let me call it. You have an entrepreneurial spirit that has a big vision of what could be possible. The question that's at the forefront of my mind now is, who are the customers, not the end users, but the customers who are going to buy these amazing floating wind farms? Is it governments? Do you have to be that big to buy something like this?
No, it's developers. So it's people that will resell the electricity to the grid. So, and it depends where you are in the world, but it's mostly utilities. In Europe, it's really the EDF, the RWE in Germany, the NBW,
the big utility companies
the big
across
utilities,
the world,
and they're the ones that have those offshore wind. So they went from onshore wind that they manage, and it's the same people that manage the onshore wind, except it's different turbines and different groups. Then they manage bottom fixed, so when the turbine goes into the seabed, that are also detained into those. Those are the ones that eventually, those are our clients, and they own and operate the farms and sell the electricity back to the grid operator. In the US, it's a little different because you can have a private power purchase. So it could be on offshore wind, someone that wants to decarbonize, an Amazon, a Google, a company like this could buy the power. Not really in Europe. But so it's also the way so to do a big project, it's three very big components you need. First one is you need site control. So site control is you have the right to the seabed. So it's very, and again, it's very different the way you win those. In the US, it's an auction. So it's really fun if you're not the one pressing the button, it's really fun to watch. And price goes up, and the one that bids the most wins the site. So you can spend 5 years developing the site, getting this and that, until BOEM, Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, decides, which is part of the DOE, decides to have the auction. Doesn't matter. Then you show up, and then you bid the most, and you win. Very, I like it, but it's very US centric. You do in other countries, you have to have your consortium and the permits and this and that, and then eventually, and sometimes in Korea, you just put a buoy out there and say, I'm measuring the site now. I'm measuring the environment. This is my site for a while. So it's more complicated to get the power. So the first thing is you need site control. Second thing is we call it consent, but you have to have all of the permits. And so in the US, I think there's like 20 different permits that you need.
Wow.
Talking about environment, control grid, connection, and all of those things. So that's what a developer does. That's their job. We come in we develop the technology and the cost of the technology, how it's done, the vessels that you use, whether you buy the steel and so on. So it's very complementary. And so once you have your consent, then you can actually go into, or you get qualified, you can go into the negotiation for a power purchase agreement. So that's your contract. How much are you going to be paid for the electricity? And in wind, it's very different than in oil and gas, where you're on the spot market, you have a vessel and you try to sell to the highest bidder. Your price is fixed for 25 years. You know what it's going to be.
For 25 years?
Yeah, maybe it's 10, sometimes 10, sometimes 25. But we design those things for, it's DDS still, right? So you design your entire project finance and everything around that power, and when you project makes sense economically, then you go to the banks and you try to finance, 70%, 60%, depending who you are, but usually about that much.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that you've got to get site control. Then you've got to get the permits, which might be anything up to 20 or different yeses in terms of the authorities saying yes. Then you've got to get a contract, which could be up to 25 years. So it's such a big thing. And then you've got to get the money. So you've got to go to the banks and negotiate and sell the idea to funders. Once you've done that, so we're assuming a yes in all of those stages, Dominique, how do you take this to market in terms of making money? So I'm talking about return on investment, because whether that's for your business, Ocergy, or it's for the funders, how do you get to that point of now we're actually getting a return on that huge investment? What's that process like?
Once you have your bank okay and you know your price, then whoever decides on the company, usually it's a board decision, you get to a point that we call FID, Final Investment Decision. When that's a go, you don't spend money. So there's usually a couple of years of engineering and fabrication. So you're just spending money, and then you have to go as fast as you can during that period where you've borrowed the money, but you don't have return. And you try to install your turbines as quick as possible. As soon as your turbines are installed and connected to the grid, so you also have to deal with the cable and so on, then the meters flow. And you're selling, basically, you're getting paid as a developer for the electricity you produce. So that's why that part is, and that's where industrialization comes from. If it takes us 3 years to fabricate and install the project, because it costs so much and you do one floater at a time, then those 3 years, you're not making a lot of revenue, but you're paying interest. For us, making a project has to be done in 1 year. So by the time you start fabricating to the part you're in the water. So if you have a gigawatts project with a 20 megawatt turbine, that's 50 units. And we're talking about 20 megawatts. So the units are, 120 meters tall. Blades are 110, 130 meters tall, much bigger. And so 1 week, so 50 units per week, one per week, it goes really, really fast. And so a lot of things that we do and our pilot that we, that we're putting together is about that, is about how do you get to 1 unit per week. So it's all about supply chain management. It's all about the Toyota production system. How did Toyota build up all the American automakers in the 90s through this and installed the lean system, managing suppliers, managing quality, managing everything. Fascinating. I mean, I spent a whole year in 2019 when we left just reading about the Toyota production system. And we apply a lot of that to what we do. We're kind of like the IKEA of floating wind. Our systems come on a boat, but seriously, it comes, the offshore platform comes in pieces that's bolted together. So, you have a side box on the vessel that has the bolts and the big wrench, Not, it's a little bit more than that, but this is really the thinking, one per week, and that's so you can actually finance. So that's how that's how our clients make money. How do we make money?
Yeah. Tell me how you make money, and then I'm going to ask you about what size is your team, Dominique, the team within Ocergy that is making this happen. How big is it?
So we make money through a licensing scheme. So we're an asset light. We manage, we do all the engineering and we support during fabrication. We have, experts. Our team, teams they're big, but they're not that big for an engineering project. We're about 40 right now. We went up a little bit, we're down a little bit, but 40 to 60 people is about the size you need. We had a structural group that has 5 people, 6 people, and hydrodynamics group that has 4. Project managers, project engineers, engineering managers and project managers managing the project sides. And we're across France and the US, so we have a little bit more SG&A than other companies, because obviously you have to finance and things, but it's not that much.
That seems remarkably small, given the complexity of that journey, project journey, isn't it? From idea to execution and licensing and return on investment. It's a long, long journey, and it's complex. So is there outsourcing as well? You've got a core project team, and do you get outsource contractors to help with any given stage, particularly because you need to move fast and keep your costs down. Is some of that outsourced?
No, but we only have a small, not a small, but maybe, a part of the entire scope. We are not the developer. So a lot of the things we talked about, the permits and all that, that's on the developer side. We are an engineering company, and our scope, so our client pays us for engineering, and then they buy a license after. So, we design the structure, and we designed the methodology around the fabrication, the installation, the specification. We come out at the end of a detailed design. We have about 100 drawings, about 1,000 drawings, fabrication drawings, that goes as a package to a yard. We don't manage the yard, so there's a contractor that does that. We support, so contractor might have 3-4 people on the yard. We have one. That just helps. That's the liaison between the engineering team and the project, and so on. So that's why I'm saying we're more of an asset light. There's some of our competitors are much bigger companies, and they take the full scope. So they have the inside engineering team and so on. So, but
So
you look at,
you're nimble, you're focused, you have big dreams. What would you say the size of the prize is with floating renewable wind energy that you which is central to Ocergy? What's the size of the prize if the industry, with you as one of the key leaders, what's the size of the prize for the planet, frankly, if we get this right in terms of investment, execution, all the things we talked about? What's the end game here in terms of
the
what
end
it could
game?
do?
So when you look at the projections of floating wind, so it kind of got delayed because it takes time and political headwinds sometimes in some countries on wind, but other countries do move forward. So we're really in a global. Our clients are all over Asia. They used to be in the States. They'll be back in the States, and mostly Europe. It's about 40 to 60 gigawatt installed by 2035, 2040. So
And what
it's
percentage
gonna
of energy would that enable to be covered? Do you know what I mean? How in terms of share of market, if we got to that sort of level, what sort of share of the energy market would that be?
So it's about the same as what people are talking. Nuclear is coming back, so it's really about the same as nuclear and floating offshore wind. When you look at the prediction, those are growing. Really, what we're trying to do globally is replace coal by renewable. Gas will always be there. One of the things so the fight between renewable and gas is about which one is the primary and which one is the supply. So renewable saying, oh, but the wind only blows once in a while, so we'll burn gas, and then whenever we need a little bit more, we'll use renewable. The plan is to kind of turn it around, as we'll use all the renewable we can get. If we need more, then we can either have batteries or turn on a gas plant. And different countries will do different things, but I think what everybody wants is really stop the coal and pollute the planet. So,
and so it's a noble cause. How do you
but
prioritize
it's a one
your
where you
time?
can make money, and I think when you look at Tom Steyer's book, cheaper, faster, better, it's really, you're not going to invest in something that doesn't make money. So, but you do make money on renewable, and I'm going to tell you why. Imagine a 1 gigawatt gas plant, and imagine a 1 gigawatt offshore wind farm. Your gas plant might be $1 billion investment, and your offshore wind plant might be 2.5. Fine, you get more capex. But then over the next 25 years, you're buying gas on the spot market, and gas is going to go up. So your operational costs are going to go sky high over 25 years. On the wind farm, the wind is free. And it will be free for 25 years unless Trump wants to put some tariff on the wind. But, sorry, stop that. That's a good one. But
The joy of living in America.
Yeah, but yeah, the wind is free. So you'll pay your capex off so quickly. And then, it is going to be more economical. And this is why we're saying people continue to invest in offshore wind. Because it makes sense. Yes, there's a lot of politics around cost and steel and this and that. But at the end of the day, if you take away all the subsidies on everything, win by miles. So
Yeah, that's my sense. You're the expert, but from a layman's point of view, I'm feeling it. I'm feeling that message strongly. Given the complexity, because for me, this just listening to you is scary in terms of how many things you have to manage, and big things. Contracting with a huge utility organization to try and get to the point where it's agreed. Massive in and of itself, let alone engineering these enormous, highly technical turbines. So complexity all around your role. How do you prioritize as the CEO? Your time, your energy, your expertise. How do you do that, Dominique?
Badly. Very bad, very badly is the answer. There's just this just was a small company, so everyone has to do more than just their job. We can be doing one thing one day and one other thing and another day, which also makes it interesting. I mean, we have a very young, bright person in France who's doing hydrodynamics, and now he's doing project management and project dev and BD and looking at LCOE models and so on. So some people love it, some people it's not for them. But I mean, there's many people that are happy working this way. So a lot of it is really finding the right person for your team. You said, how do you lead? How do you manage? How do you sell? And for me, I hired someone that was working for me at PPI before, and I'm trying to tell him why. It's like, I drink the Kool-Aid. I know what you're doing. You don't have to sell it to me. And I think this is really what it is I don't have to sell. That's the best sell, because I say what I feel. I say, why do I do? Why have I been there? And that's what I'm doing. You join me or you don't join me. It's your choice. I'll find someone. And so the people that do join me, it's because they want to. And I think that's very important. So people are happy to be there.
One of the things I think makes you unusual and special is I get a strong creative entrepreneurial spirit from you, innovative, and I also get, which is your profession as well, a really rigorous engineer. So I get a creative brain and an analytical, structured brain, which is a very unusual combination to have both. I also get an energy to be a doer as well as a leader. And many leaders just delegate all the work. But I get a sense, because you and I have been on several communications, where you are gloriously doing as well. You're managing the finance team and the fundraising and the contracting, and of course the engineering. So when do you get downtime, Dominique? Because you have a family as well, I know. When do you actually give yourself time to relax, refresh, breathe, reflect? How do you do? How do you do that?
First thing, it's not just me. We are multiple. I have a CEO, a CCO, and a CTO that have been working. I've been working with them since the beginning. Christian, we were in Berkeley together.
Cool.
He's a bit older than me. How advisors do, they have PhD students. And so I took over his PhD. And then he moved and said, I'll never move to Texas. So he had a job at Texas A&M. So he moved to France. So I'll never move to Texas. When I started in Texas at ExxonMobil, he was already there working for Shell. And then 3 years later, we left. We came back to California, and there was no job. So we started a small company. No investors, just engineering. And our first hire, Alexia, is today our CTO. So she went from working for us to working with us, which is absolutely awesome. But they're amazing engineers, and we have amazing engineers as well. So yes, I do understand I don't do enough engineering for my like, but we got a great team. It's not just me. Now, how do I relax? Yes. I think this is where we're going. I know where you're going with this. Yes. So I do meditate often, not very long, but I do meditate. But my best meditation is when I go sailing, and that's really my passion. Because you see, I'm an architect, but yes, on Sunday I went and I was going to revarnish I have a boat, I'm lucky, and the wind was blowing, and my neighbors were going out, and I went out and I sailed around, I went, so it was in Richmond. I sailed around Alcatraz. There was a couple boats, cruising. So I went behind them, tried and passed them and came back. And they were looking at this boat with this single guy that's like at the bow with his, remote control driving his boat around. And I came back and I was just refreshed. It's really about refreshing and clear my mind and doing this. And I walk a lot.
I think that's absolutely key. It's why I asked the question, Dominique, because it is a complex role. You're crazy busy and you're very needed in the business, which is a small business by resource with big ambitions. And yachting, I totally get how that is completely refreshing, because you are genuinely focused on doing something outdoors, which requires focus, and that allows your brain to defocus about everything else. Being out on the ocean in some way just is a very special option to do. So great leaders, I think, keep themselves physically fit, but they also keep themselves mentally fit, so that when they are busy at work with all of the complexity, they can do that with a clear mind and a healthy body. So that's incredibly cool. So what's next? What's the big next for you? Because you're on a path already. You talked to us about the process and it's clear. But what's the big next project for you?
So we're putting this 3 megawatt pilot in the water next month. So it'll be on LinkedIn, I'm sure. It's with Total Energy. It's connected to a gas. It's connected to Tullin. Tullin is a gas platform that's 200 miles from shore. And Tullin produces 5% of the gas of the UK. So it's a big thing. And Total, and Priyanay, the CEO that wanted to do this, is put this pilot right next to it. And so the 3 megawatt of the turbine will produce about 20% of the power needed by the platform. So it's cool. It's pretty cool. So we have this. Then we have the next phase, which is so now the turbines have grown, from 3 to 5 to 10 to 15 to now we're working with 20 megawatt turbines. So we are working on another pilot for 2029, 2030. 2029 is real time frame right now, and this is to de-risk those new turbines that will be used for the large projects. You can't. Sorry, my phone is ringing out the hood. You can't really do a bank finance of a project with a brand new turbine and expect to have all of the performance warranties and everything that you need if you don't go back and do a pilot. And we're not in the process of, some companies love, DOE money and do pilots after pilots. We're about, being commercial, but we still recognize the fact that we continue to have to de-risk to be able to get there. So that's another project, either 1 or 2 units. And then really focusing on those projects that will be in the, it takes about 10 years to do projects. And so now, I mentioned the UK with AO6, AO7, AO8 this year. I'm sorry, AO is in France, AR in the UK. So there's going to be about 5 or 6 projects, about 100 to 200 megawatt. So it's about winning. So for us, winning means that the developer chooses our technology, winning those and then executing those at the right price, and so that means on time and schedule. So that's really the main thing. And we've de-risked our technology over the past 6 years through those pilots and multiple scales and things like that. Today, we think we are backable, with our technology, and that's what that's where we have to work with developers and get those done.
Thank you, Dominique. I'm going to read out the 3 things. When I went to ChatGPT, when we first spoke a couple of weeks ago, I got onto ChatGPT and I said, what makes Dominique Roddier so special? And this is what ChatGPT said. So I'm going to get your feedback about you from ChatGPT.
From ChatGPT, Number 1, I've never done this before.
I know, and it's a must-do when you're meeting someone for the first time. Pioneer of the entire offshore industry. So you're seen as, it actually says the pioneer, which is pretty cool. So pioneer of offshore industry. Deep technical expert. So that's about engineering to a large extent, and it's structural engineering, aerospace engineering, oceanic engineering, and clear energy leadership. So clean energy leadership. How does that sound? Does that sound like you?
I don't know. Probably.
Maybe. Well, it does to me. It does to me. Absolutely does to me. And I like the words like pioneer.
It's very nice.
So, Dominique, I'm going to ask you a question about, and genuinely, people will be watching this who are fascinated by the industry and by the especially renewable energy in concept. And I'd love you as a leader in that sector to share what are your top tips for anyone, first of all, that would want to come into the industry. What are the top tips if you're saying this is the industry for me, maybe leaving university saying this is where I want to go? What would your top tips be for new starters in the industry?
The first one is the passion. You know, I think you spend a lot of time at work. If you don't like what you do, go find something else. And so this is not an industry that's easy. You know, you're not gonna make the salaries that you make in finance or things like that. So don't do it for the money. Do it because that's what you want. That's what you want to do. And then it doesn't matter whether you're an engineer or finance, you know, a business developer, a permitting person. It's you want to change the world. And that's why you want to work there.
And I get that from you. Got that the first time I met you. This guy wants to change the world for the better. So that's one, passion.
Now, yeah, skills. I think it's not easy. And, you know, people, you know, it's, you'll be working with people that are, I don't know what's a good word. That's a nice word. That have high expectations, I think I would say. And so you have to put in, you have to be ready to put in the time and the effort. But if it's your passion, it's easy. You know, it's easy to take a call because it's global, and to take a call at 7 p.m. your time because your client is is in the US. I mean, that's what happened to me this morning. And, you know, there's people in Europe, and it was like 8 p.m. and they're still working with me. And, you know, and so people are not really counting because they like what they do. And so it goes back, you know, I think everything is going to circle back to why do you want to do a job that doesn't pay very well, that's demanding and all that. And it's always going to come back to the same thing because you enjoy what you do.
Thank you. And this is why this podcast is called Who's Your Captain? You're the captain. You're the captain of renewable energy in my eyes, which is great. But Who's Your Captain is about how can you inspire the next generation of passionate leaders like yourself so that they become captains of renewable energy and of floating wind farms and things like that. My final question is
let
around...
let me tell you just one thing about that. And, you know, we're talking a lot about my, you know, leadership and things like that. And a good leader is someone that grows the people. He's not someone that does the job. And so, yeah, I'm part of a team, but I'm the leader of that team, but I'm first and foremost part of the team. It was also, you know, we don't talk too much about sailing, but this is always my role on the sailboat is not that, you know, I'm the one that just made the boat go fast. And sometimes I say I made the boat go fast by keeping people happy. But what does that mean? Is, you know, something is, you know, there's a spinnaker that's not going, I'm there. There's something else that's their tactic is not right. We talk about this. So it's really about covering what I do on the sailboat is covering the holes. And that makes the boat go fast because you kind of see the problems and you do this. And that's really my role. My role is not to tell people what to do. My role is, I have people that can tell people what to do down and, you know, around. My role is to make sure that everybody has what they need to do their job.
That's great. And so here comes that final question. It was, what was your top tip to come into the industry? What's your top tip to be a leader in the industry?
I don't think you're not a leader or not. Leadership comes from inside. You know, it's heroes are not made by the war. You know, they're heroes whether there's a war or not. And it's kind of the same thing. Top tip two, you can say, you know, someone asked me at PPI, it's like, oh, I want to be so it was, you know, an engineer that was kind of growing and we're doing his review. I'm like, what do you want to do in the future? It's like, I want to be a lead. I want to be a mentor.
Oh, yeah.
And I looked at him and I said, I cannot make you a mentor. But the day someone comes and asks you a question, then you've become a mentor. And it's the same with leadership. The day someone comes and asks you for advice on how you do things and you help, you just become a leader because they just followed you. I can't ask people to follow me or to follow anyone. They just do it because you have this within you.
Yeah, then it's in my experience, Dominique, that actually people with passion, it's back to your point, people with real passion who see the need for leadership sometimes step up because there's no one else stepping up. And I think that's part of the journey here, because if you're driving the level of change you are in the industry, all for the good, the cause that you're leading here is important for our planet. It's really fundamental that you don't have to decide when you're young, I'm going to be a leader. But there's a point when your passion says, I've got to lead now because this needs leadership and I'm up for it. I'm the captain of this. And I think that's something that I get from you. I get this passion about what you're trying to do. And then leadership's part of that journey. It's not the intention. That's what I get. Does that resonate with you?
You know, I always joke because there's three of us, and I always say I pulled a short straw because my job sucks. My job totally sucks. I mean, you talked about it. Finance, contracts, all that stuff. No, I'm an engineer, but it just made sense given our personalities and so on. And when we talk and talk with investors or talk with partners and things like that, I'm there. I'm in those discussions and people join. They don't have to, but they do. But at the same time, I'm not the only one that's leading in this company. I think that we all are very, very tight, and people, we rely on everybody. We're really part of, it's a team that we have.
And I get such a strong sense about that culture within Ocergy that you're part of, that it is absolutely a culture of like-minded, passionate people making a real difference in an industry that really matters. And for that reason, I just want to say thank you so much, Dominique, for your time, your insight, and your inspiration. I find it absolutely inspirational what you're doing, the enormity of how to do it, the complexity, the length of time it takes, the amount of funding required, the amount of patience, extraordinary. And so I commend that. And a big, big thank you for your time and for sharing your insights. It's been an amazing podcast. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mark. And if someone sees this and gets excited about offshore wind, then it was very worth it. So.